good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to TechTeach Session 4. Today, we're going to explore the fundamentals of Agile delivery. So I'm Danielle Keenan, and I'm the Social Responsibility Manager at Kainos, and I'm part of the Software Alliance Schools Committee. TechTeach is a monthly information session for teachers, and it's delivered by different member companies of the Software Alliance. So I'm delighted to introduce my colleague, Sean Ganley. Sean is a lead software engineer at Kainos, and he heads up our engineering academies. He has trained hundreds of apprentices and graduates. I think I'm safe to say hundreds at this stage, Sean. So over the past few years, Sean's been leading on our engineering academy. And he's here today to share an overview of Agile delivery. So look, please feel free to ask some questions. You can use the chat, and we should have some time for questions at the end. So welcome, Sean. I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Danielle, and thank you for that very kind introduction. So yeah, I'm Sean, everyone. Very nice to meet you. Thank you very much for taking the time to come along to the section. Like Danielle says, if you have any questions at any point, hopefully you all have access to the raise hand button. If you stick your hand up at any point whenever I finish talking, I'll have a look and see if anyone's got their hands up. And you should also have access to a chat function. So if you have any questions or comments, or just feel free to chat among yourselves and share some ideas while I'm going through the slides. You'll be glad to know there's not many slides. I think my aim for this is to be as practical for your guys' benefit as possible. So like Danielle says, I look after our engineering academy. So that's an internal training program that all of our apprentices, graduates and placements go through whenever they join Kainos. So for graduates and placements, that's 7 weeks. And for apprentices, that's 16 weeks. And yeah, over the past 6 years, I think I've had over 400 people come through across the UK and Gdansk. So I think I have a pretty good gauge on kind of what skills people are coming out of education with, and the kind of gap between what we need within the industry. And one of those things is Agile delivery, which makes up around half of the training academies that I deliver, which is what I want to talk about today. And hopefully you'll be able to take a similar approach or similar sessions from what we deliver during the academies, and you'll be able to use those hopefully within your classrooms, or by any means. I'm more than happy to chat with you guys if you have any ideas. So yeah, like I said, I joined Kainos just coming up to 11 years ago now as a placement student. So I've been with Kainos throughout my entire journey. I've worked across lots of our different accounts with clients like the Home Office, the Department for Transport, HMCTS, lots of other things. But my main role at the minute is about helping to bridge that gap between education and what we need for people to be put on projects. The main kind of outcome for today, and the main outcome for the session that we run during the academy, is to get our people collaborating as a team to work towards a dynamic goal. And I'm going to talk about some of the things that I see from the people that join us, some of the pitfalls that they fall into in a minute. But one of the things you may notice within there is there's no mention of software. So Agile isn't directly tied to software. We can make this kind of approach work for anything you guys want to work. So I know most people on this call are probably coming from either computer science or SSD or some similar subjects like that. But this approach could also work for non-tactical, non-coding exercises and projects. So if you think these are worthwhile, you can feel free to share them around with non-coding subjects as well. The main thing that we want to get across whenever we talk about Agile delivery is focusing on MVP, minimum viable product. And you can see in this pie chart, actually, I want to ask a question to everyone first. Who here teaches Agile as part of their curriculum? If you can use the hands up function. So I'm seeing a couple of hands already going up. Yeah, so I'm not going to touch on the theory behind Agile at any point in this talk. There's lots of stuff. I've got resources towards the end that you can use if you don't currently teach Agile. But if you want to stick your hands down, what I'll ask now is that any of you guys that teach Agile, do you do it just by fear? Well, actually, we'll do this as a yes or no question. Do you use a group project or any sort of practical experience whenever you teach Agile? If you do, if you want to put your hands up. Okay, so this is what I thought. I think a lot of people are very familiar with the concept of Agile and what it is. The part that I want to get to here is how we can use that in a project or group environment. So focusing on MVP is one of the things that we try and get across to everyone that comes through the door. Obviously, with waterfall, you have got all of the requirements and built everything. That's not the way that industry works anymore. What we tend to have is different levels of priority for the features that we build. So for me, if I'm looking at this pie chart and I'm seeing, well, 7% of the features that are in the system are always used, that to me is a phase one backlog of tasks that I want my people to prioritize. I want my teams to prioritize delivering those features so that the people that use the system can start using the system because they're always using the features that are being delivered. And that's the kind of thing that we want to get our teams used to whenever they're working through the project. So some of the common pitfalls. So this is really when we run these activities, we run them across multiple weeks or multiple months. And the first week or the first sprint that the teams all work through, we always see a lot of common pitfalls, the common things that people do that isn't agile. So one of those things is bringing too many things in progress. And that's where the term done comes from, because as technical people, as software engineers, whenever we finish writing code, we tend to say something is done. But within the world of Agile, something isn't done until it's actually been tested and signed off by a product owner or a client and moved into the done column. And I'll talk about that whenever I'm sharing some of the resources that you guys can use in a minute. Working on non-priority features. I see this a lot where people who aren't comfortable with some of the requirements that are high priority, they'll see something very low down in priority order and they'll say, oh, I know how to do that. I can do that really quickly. And they'll just pick that up and start working on it. But that defeats the purpose of having priority on tasks and features that we work on. So we try to avoid doing that. Going beyond the scope of a ticket. So every feature will have a set of acceptance criteria that you need to meet to be able to say that a ticket is done. What I see a lot is people who will go above and beyond to add things that are outside of the scope of that ticket, making it look really nice, making it do something that's not part of the ticket because they think that that is something that the customer would want, which isn't very agile. It's not what we want to deliver exactly what the customer asks for in the quickest way possible. And then the customer can give us feedback on if they want to make it look nicer, if they want to make it behave slightly differently. Giving inaccurate estimates and updates. We see this a lot, especially with the junior people we have coming through. Whenever we ask them at things like daily stand-ups, how long do you think it's going to take for you to achieve a certain feature, be able to deliver a certain feature? What we see a lot is people say, oh, I've got a bug at the minute of something that's not working. As soon as I get that done, it'll be ready and we'll move on and I'll start something else. But that's very rarely ever the case within industry. We tend to think of estimates, or the way you should think about estimates is how long is it going to take to write the code, test the code, get it signed off, get it merged, all of those different things. So those things tend to be forgotten by people at the very earlier on in their careers. Resolving merge conflicts. I'm assuming I'll ask again, does everyone here teach Git as part of their curriculum? Can I get a show of hands who currently uses Git as any part of any other coding? I'm not seeing many hands going up there. Okay, so Git's a tool that we use all of the time in the industry. All of our projects will use Git. And one of the things that we see is whenever people start, I'll say to them, who's used Git? And everyone will say, yeah, I've used it, I've got experience with it. And then I ask, well, who's dealt with merge conflicts before? And everyone kind of hems and has a little bit about whether they've actually dealt with merge conflicts before. Because I think what happens is a lot of people are really good at the happy path of Git, but not so much whenever multiple people are all writing code on the same project, about trying to actually merge your code with someone else's code. It's something that we see a lot of people struggling with, and that's something that I think as theory, it's really difficult to teach, but whenever you're working in a group environment and people are collaborating and writing code together, it's something that becomes evident very quickly. And the last thing is applying code review comments. So as part of the industry standards, pretty much every line of code that I write as a developer is going to be reviewed by someone else in my team. And then I'm responsible for addressing the comments that have been applied or been risen by other people on the team. And that's my responsibility. And I see people struggling with actually being able to get something from code review state into ready and ready to test. So this is an example of an exercise that I would give out to a group of people, large group of people. So you guys might think of this as you have a classroom of 20 or 30, maybe you have more, maybe you have less. It doesn't really matter. We can adjust the sizes of these for however many people you guys have in your classroom. So I would tend to have roughly about a cohort of about 30 people. What I'll do is I'll break those down into teams of 4 to 6 people. That gives us enough people where if someone's off sick or someone's not attending that day, we'll still be able to make progress without them, but it's not too big to the point where everyone on the team isn't able to learn from what they're doing and be able to pick up new tasks. So I find 4 to 6 people is a nice sweet spot. We ask them to deliver a CRUD application, CRUD being create, read, update, delete. The reason I use this is because it's very easy to scale this out to make a really big project from a really simple concept. So here I use the context of an employee management application. So I'm looking people to create employees and update employees and delete employees and view employees. And you can see how that would quickly be able to blossom out into a really big project. So if we start adding things like roles into our application, well, now you need to be able to create, update, and delete roles and assign those to employees. And you can really start scaling that to take up as much time as you have possible with your teams. So like I've said, this can be kind of scaled or changed to fit anything, any length of time or any group size that you like. I have run this on real projects. We usually do 2-week sprints that will last for years. In the academy, we will run 3 one-week sprints. So that is 3 iterations of doing sprint planning and stand-ups and show and tells and retrospectives. But I've also ran a 2-day workshop for Queen's University. And for that, we did 2 one-day sprints. So you can make these as long or as short as you want. I think a nice sweet spot, if you've got a couple of weeks, is to get really familiar with that iteration and do these in 1-week increments. I know you guys probably only see your classes maybe a couple of times a week for a couple of hours at a time. That's absolutely fine. You could extend these if you don't think 1 week with them is enough time. You can make this 2 weeks and beyond. Danielle's going to send out the slides after the end of the session, and you'll each be able to click this sprint board link, which will take you to Trello. I don't know if anyone's got experience with Trello before, but it's a very simple kind of project planning tool that we can use to drag tickets or features across the board into multiple different columns. So very, very simple. My only ask for you guys is that if you want to reuse this Trello board, you can just click the 3 dots over on the right-hand side of the page and click copy board, and that will create a version of the board that you only have access to. So you can go in and change this to as and when you need it. You can change the context. It doesn't have to be about an employee system. If you guys wanted to make this about a library system or a school system, just change the context from employees to books, from employees to classes, anything like that that you feel will give your group the best experience for running an Agile project. So what you'll need to basically start an Agile project is you'll need your teams and you'll need a copy of the backlog for each team. So this is what I would call a backlog. It has some tickets in a phase 1 backlog. So these are our high priority, always used features. And then a phase 2 backlog. These are our lower priority, often used features. And this is a good way to test that people focus on the phase 1 backlog before they move on to things in the phase 2 backlog. And I'll talk about how each different sprint ceremony will impact on this sprint board. So you'll all get access to this after the session. So this is what a typical sprint will look like. You start with your product backlog. That is this Trello board here. And each of your teams will go through a sprint planning session, which will generate a sprint backlog. So that's the tickets that they're going to work on this sprint. As they go through the week or the 2 weeks, apologies for that, they will do a daily scrum or stand-up meeting where they'll give an update on the progress that they've made on the ticket that they're working on. At the end of the sprint, you'll then do a show and tell or a sprint review. That's where you guys you can act as the client for your teams. You can see what the guys have been working on and then give feedback based upon that. So that's where I would ask if people could maybe focus on a different priority, or if there's something that they've delivered that I don't like how they've done it, I can ask them to address that in future sprints that are coming up. And the last thing is the sprint retrospective. So that's where the team looks back on how they think they've got on in this sprint and make any changes. So for me, I like to focus on what's really slowing the team down in making progress this week. So is there maybe a breakdown in communication? Are people not picking tickets up to test or review quickly enough? Is there a bottleneck with you guys as the client for reviewing what the guys have been delivering? Anything like that can come back from the retrospective, and that's really designed to improve the efficiency going forward. So the first of those is sprint planning. So let's come back to the backlog. So you'll see here we've got a product backlog, but we also have a sprint one backlog. So in that first sprint planning meeting, so if you guys started on a Monday morning with each of your teams, what you would be looking for at the end of sprint planning is for the teams to agree on what they're going to work on for that sprint. So if the team is comfortable that they will get, let's say, user story 1, the ability to view employees, and user story 2, the ability to add a new employee done, they will move those over to the sprint 1 backlog. And that is what is called their commit for the week. That's what the team is committing to completing by the end of the week. And that should be the main focus and the priority for the week. The team shouldn't be going and pulling things in from the product backlog unless the things in the sprint backlog have already been completed. You'll see for each of the tickets in here, I've added some acceptance criteria. I've also added some TAC notes to help people work through some of the problems that they've been working on, and I've added an estimate. So there's an easy way to do an estimate and there's a hard way to do an estimate. I think for you guys at a school level, the easy way to do an estimate is if someone thinks it'll take them 5 days to complete a feature, so the ability to view employees, then you give it a 5. If they think it'll take 3 days, you give it a 3. That's a simple approach to estimating the amount of work that they have to complete. After sprint planning, you as the client can sign off. You can say, yes, you're happy with their sprint backlog. It's now up to the teams to go off and work on making progress through each of the tickets during the week. And you'll see here I've labeled each of the columns in this Trello board to give an idea of who's working on each part of it. So let's say I'm part of the team that is working on this sprint backlog. What I can do is I can join this card, so it puts my face against this card, and I'll move this to in progress. So this is me starting to write code or starting to deliver the feature that has been asked of. So that's where I am making sure that I'm meeting each of the acceptance criteria in the ticket. Once I've written my code, I will create a pull request. I've included some information about Git and GitHub and pull requests a little bit later on in the slides. But once I have a pull request, which has all of my code changes in it, I can move that across to the pull request review column. And you'll see here, this is where dev2 comes in. So a different person on the team should review my code and say whether, yes, they're happy with the changes I've made, or no, they'd like me to make some changes before it's ready to test. If they want me to make some changes, I can move it back into progress. Once they're happy enough and they've approved my code changes, I'll move it into a ready for test column. Obviously, within the industry, we have quality assurance people or testers, QA people. They are solely responsible for making sure the quality of the features meets the acceptance criteria in the ticket. So obviously, you guys won't have those within the classroom. what I find is a good approach to this is if you get someone else who wasn't involved in writing the code to do the testing and make sure that it meets all of the acceptance criteria, that's a good in between. We don't need a tester, we just need someone else to be able to test the code for us. So when that person is testing the code, they'll move it into the in test column. They'll make sure that the feature matches all of the acceptance criteria that's been mentioned. If they find anything that is a bug or doesn't work like it's supposed to, they can move it back to the in progress column and add some comments on to say what exactly doesn't work. Once they're happy with it, they'll move it to a ready for sign off column. And that's where you guys as the client or the lead for this project will say whether you're happy with the feature or you're not happy with the feature. And again, you can make changes to what has been delivered up to this point in the project, in the life cycle of the ticket. So you guys are going to give the thumbs up that you're happy with it or a thumbs down. So you would get your student to demo to you the feature, make sure it all works. If there's data being input, you'll make sure that you can't, break the data. You can't provide too long of samples so that this doesn't work. But if you're happy with it, with the changes, you'll move it into a ready to merge column. And this is where we merge from what's known as a feature branch, so a branch that we write all of our code in, into the main branch, and that'll be the person who worked on the code's responsibility to do that. And only when things are in the main branch is a ticket actually considered done, and we claim those 5 points as 5 story points delivered this sprint. And I tend to not let anyone demo anything at a show and tell ceremony unless it's in the done column. So that's my way of encouraging people not to leave loads of things sitting in the in test or pull review column. You're only going to claim the points and you're only going to be able to demo your features if you get a ticket to the done column. So I realize that was a lot of information in a short period of time. I'm more than happy to take any questions if there's any in the chat. So yeah, there was a question about Git. So Git is source control. It's basically a way of having multiple people writing code in a single repository. And I've got some information about that, like I said, some resources about that later on as we go through the slides. But yeah, that is industry standard. There's basically no company that you'll go into within the industry that won't use Git. Okay, so that is sprint planning, and that's kind of the flow of the work week. A daily scrum or stand-up session is no more than a 15-minute session where each person on the team will give an update on their progress on the ticket that they're working on. So if I'm running a stand-up session, what I'll do is I will share this board and we'll have each member of the team on the call or in person with me. And what I will do is I will ask the person whose face is against each ticket to give an update on the progress, what still needs done, and is there anything that's preventing you from getting it done? So maybe it's sitting in the ready to test column and we don't have any testers. There's no one on the team available to test this feature. Well, that is what we consider a blocker, something that we need to address and fix to help progress this ticket. So we would have the conversation on the stand-up meeting to say, who's available to test this feature to make sure that it gets to the end, into the done column before the end of the sprint. And we will do that for all of the tickets that get brought into progress into the sprint backlog. So that's a stand-up. A show and tell is just a presentation from the team. They will present all of the work that they have completed that week. So anything that's in the done column, if I move this one back, so if we've got one ticket in the done column, they'll be able to demo that one ticket. It's basically presenting back to you as the client the work that they've achieved for that week, for you to be able to give feedback to them about what they've delivered. And don't be afraid to suggest improvements or changes to things during a show and tell session, because that is really what creates this dynamic priority priorities that people struggle with, I think, at the very early on in their career, where you ask them to change what they're focusing on or change the priority of some of the tickets in the backlog. So what I would do at the end of the first sprint, if people are working through the first product backlog, I would say, oh, that looks great. It would be really nice if that had some branding as part of it. So if you move the branding to be higher priority and focus on that sooner rather than later. And that means it's a team's responsibility to bring that branding ticket up to be higher priority. And that's what they can focus on in the next sprint. A sprint retrospective, I have also included a link to what we call a retro board. This is where we identify the things that have went well this week. So maybe we've got a lot of things done. Maybe we've collaborated well as a team. Maybe we've delivered more than we committed to at the start of the sprint. All of those things are things that could go well during a sprint. The things that need to change are the things that didn't go so well. So maybe there's been a breakdown in communication. Maybe there's been bottlenecks somewhere. Maybe our planning wasn't very good. Maybe our estimates were too high or too small. Maybe we brought in more tickets than we could handle. And those are things that we would bring up during a retrospective. We would have an honest conversation as a team. How can we address those changes? And those would usually feed into the action column that we have here. So what are the actions that we can make in the next sprints coming up so that we can be better and more efficient in future sprints? And like I mentioned before, I've got some additional resources here. So if you don't teach Agile or you want to know more about Agile, you can use the Scrum Framework link, which has a lot of information about the stuff that I've been talking about. If you're not familiar with Git and GitHub, there's a really good YouTube video here that either you can watch or you can send on to your students as well. I'm a fan of always using YouTube videos and tutorials and stuff like that. So I've got a lot of links for those. If you have any issues, just reach out to me and I can send them on. And GitHub Actions is basically an additional feature of GitHub that allows you to automate some of the checks that you can do on code to speed things up a bit. But that's probably outside of the realms. If you're not teaching Git and GitHub Actions is probably outside of the realms of what you would be teaching anyway. So you don't need to worry too much about that. So Danielle has asked me to give a shout out for the next session, which is on Tuesday, the 9th of April, which is going to be focused around unit testing. Danielle, anything more you want to add to that before I open the floor?
No, thank you, Sean, for mentioning the next session. But look, we have 2 minutes left. If there's any questions from the teachers, if there's anything you would like Sean to recap on. Sean, a question or more of a statement really. Trello is a free resource.
Trello is a free resource, yes.
Yeah.
You only have to sign up for it to get a certain number of boards. You get, I think, 10 for free, so that you can delete boards whenever you're finished with them to keep that number down. I've been using Trello for 6 years and never had to pay for it, so I wouldn't imagine any of you guys would either.
It's great. Good to know. It's a really brilliant resource. Any questions, Ed, from any of the teachers? Question just in there. What types of project software would you recommend to use?
That is a really good question. So I tend to steer towards what people know. Within our engineering academy, we teach databases, we teach APIs with Java, and we teach web development. So those are, we use Node.js for web development, by the way. So those are the technologies that we stick to. I actually have a starter kit here. If you guys want to make use of it, again, this is open source, go and use it and make use of it. For basically a very quick startup of having a Node.js application that talks to a database. And that could be used, that's what we use for our Queen's University sprints. Was a Node.js application talking to a MySQL database. And this has all of the code needed to be able to talk to a database. All you need to do is be able to set the database up. I don't know if, I'm sure you guys teach databases as part of your curriculums. I don't know if you use MySQL or SQL Server or what the preferred database software is within education at the minute.
Just have a few comments coming through there, Sean.
would be very useful to get all these resources and links. Yeah, like I said, I'll send Danielle over the slides at the end. All of these links are included in the slides, and there's lots of information on here. I've also included a link to my LinkedIn account. If you have any questions, just shoot me on a message, and I'll pick that up as soon as I get it. But hopefully you find those useful, and I'm more than happy to work with anyone who needs to make some changes to make that work for yourselves. Like I said, the thing that's going to make this most useful to you guys is if it works for your current curriculum that you already teach. So if you guys are using C# or .NET or anything like that, I don't want to completely reinvent the wheel and change that for you guys. You can absolutely use those languages and tools to deliver an Agile project. So whatever makes it most easy for you.
That's great, Sean. Thank you. So folks, we're just almost out of time. We're just a few moments over. See, there's still a question coming through there, but we can always respond to the questions after today. But Sean, thank you for coming along today and sharing that great overview of Agile. I certainly find that useful, and hopefully the teachers can bring that into the classroom and start using Trello if they're not already using it. And of course, maybe look at GitHub as well, because it's such a great resource. So thank you to everyone for joining the call. We look forward to seeing you on Tuesday, the 9th of April, and we will circulate the recording and the slides after this call. So thank you, everyone, and take care.